Okay, good Friday morning, Backyard Naturalists. It's Friday. Uh, what's the date? It is January 20th, 2023. My name is Tim. I work for the Urban Ecology Center here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States of America. And I don't know if this has been happening to the rest of you, but this winter, I've had two guest appearances in my house by today's featured organism. And our kids know the routine. If they see a stink bug, which isn't very often, but if they see one, they call me and I take care of the situation. They don't even have to look up from their iPad. I and the whole family are fascinated by these bugs to different degrees. Since I became a homeowner in the year 2009, I've only dealt with the occasional stink bug in the past few years. Some years have been a little more active than others, but for the most part in my situation, well, it's been maybe like a half dozen or less per year. So what are they? Why do they sometimes enter my house? Do they stink? Should I be concerned? These are the questions we'll look into today through stories of the brown marmorated stink bug in episode 21 of season 4 of the Backyard Naturalist, Pretty in Stink. Now I have that song from Pretty in Pink running through my head. And a warm thank you and welcome to all of you, with a special shout out to those of you that subscribe to the Backyard Naturalist. We really appreciate your support in keeping this series accessible and available. I also want to announce that this month's subscriber appreciation field trip is going through a familiar place to many, a park on the east side of Milwaukee, originally called River Park, an Olmsted Park that was one of the original Milwaukee County parks back in 1890. And we'll take a short walk through the park looking for both the ecological wonders that are often featured here on the Backyard Naturalist that are found in the park, as well as looking at some of the remnants of the rich human history of the area. So again, this trip is open to anyone but free to subscribers, and I hope you can join me in an afternoon stroll through one of my favorite local green spaces. And again, hopefully we'll be doing it on snowshoes, but we'll see. It's been a little while since we've had something to report from the skies, and oftentimes the problem with being interested in astronomical events and interested in nature is you're burning the candle at both ends, and sometimes these events are difficult to tune into because they happen at odd hours. But we got a nice event coming up, a fun event this Monday at a very sane time if the skies are clear. Try to find a place where you can see the horizon to the southwest within about an hour or so after the sun sets. And here in Milwaukee, it's about 4:50. So try to make it out, sometime between 5:30. If it's clear, you should be able to see a neat little trio of objects dancing together, starting with a razor thin crescent moon that's going to disappear fairly quickly. And then it's going to be hanging out with two very bright planets, Venus and Saturn. They're going to be about 1 degree apart, and 1 degree is the width of an index finger if you hold it out at arm's length. And the only problem here is that Venus is going to by far outshine Saturn. So with the naked eye, it might even be hard to tell the two apart. So all you need is a pair of binoculars. If you have something like a scope or a telescope, great, but you really just need a pair of binoculars. And then you should be able to see all three objects hanging out together more clearly. If you do go out, good luck, and we'll hope for clear skies. So the featured critter, the stink bug. What is a stink bug? How is it related to other life forms, other bugs? And it's important to start with the fact that there are other things that are called stink bugs. So there are a variety of insects, but for today's episode, because this is Backyard Naturalist, which also includes our house, and if someone were to say, hey, I had a stink bug in my house, we are referring to this specific species of bug called the brown marmorated stink bugs, among the other stink bugs. So it's the kind you find in your house. We'll start here. And this belongs to an order of insects called the Hemiptera, also called the true bugs. Hemi meaning half, like a hemisphere, and ptera meaning wing. And based on the structure of their wings, kind of look like they're divided in half. And this group shares the characteristic, the really cool characteristic of having piercing, sucking mouth parts as opposed to chewing mouth parts, which is important to our story today. So we've had several other backyard stars from this group, such as the 17-year cicada, and one of my favorites, the spittlebug, which is the juvenile form of the froghoppers that uses that piercing, sucking mouth part to drink fluid from the plant and poop out that nice bubble home that it lives in. And other famous hemipterans include aphids and their fantastic relationship with ants, as well as the maybe familiar pesty scale insects that sometimes hitch a ride on your houseplants. And in our journey towards the stink bug among the hemipterans, we will go down the path of the Heteroptera, which is Greek for different wings. Hetero, different, ptera, wings. And they're named this because most species have 4 wings that both have a hard portion as well as a membranous portion on them. So they're kind of different, divided in half and different. And this group includes the truly magical water striders that to me invokes images of a Northwoods lake at sunset. And this group also includes the fascinating and predatory water bugs. Here's a giant water bug. If you ever get a chance to see one of those, that's fascinating. It also includes the mysterious lace bugs and the lurking assassin bugs. And then of course, our all-time favorite bug, which has yet to make its appearance here, the bed bug. So as you see here, our stink bug is in wonderful company so far. And we continue down the stink bug lineage and we reach the family Pentatomidae, which we call, at least here in the States, the stink bugs. If you go across to English-speaking parts of the old world, they're called the shield bugs. And we call them stink bugs because when they are threatened, they will release a pungent defensive spray like a skunk does. And then they call them the shield bugs because of the shield-shaped body. Looks like kind of like a coat of arms. There's a lot of species in this family, 5,000 or more. And unlike some of the more famous heteropterans, this is a almost completely vegetarian group, not entirely, but almost completely vegetarian, which hopefully is good for your stress level. Then when you see one in your house, they don't want to and can't really bite you. But being a vegetarian can be really bad for farmers or people that own orchards, because a lot of these bugs become introduced pests and they can cause severe damage to agricultural crops. Although there are a few species in this group that are predatory, and then some can sometimes help in a beneficial way by eating the things that are harming the crops. The name Pentatomidae has its roots in the Greek pente, meaning 5, and this refers to the 5 segments of their antennae. So they're named for the 5 parts of their antennae. And for most of this is the stink bug group. There is a genus of beetles found particularly in the Southwest. I don't know, maybe in Southern California, Amanda, the Eloides. They're also known colloquially as the stink bug. So you could be referring to either of these groups. From here, we move to the genus Haliomorpha, and there are 40 species in this genus, but none of them so famous as Haliomorpha halis, or the brown marmorated stink bug. So what is the story of the stink bug? This beautiful bug is originally native to parts of Asia, particularly China, Japan, and Korea. So the dark part of this map, but then when you look at the current distribution, or at least from a few years ago, you can see that when you look at the key, it didn't take long for it to spread throughout the world. In the US, it's a fairly recent introduction, and ground zero in the US was not a coastal town, but Allenstown, Pennsylvania, 1998. Likely an accidental introduction from a shipping container that's made its way to a port and then to Allenstown. And within 12 years, it spread to become a full-on agricultural pest in the East, particularly in orchards, particularly in stone fruit orchards, peaches and apple orchards. And then really only over the past 10 years or so did it spread to other parts of the world where it's also become a problem. It's had a particularly devastating effect in Eastern Europe, especially in the chestnut fields of Georgia and Turkey, and in the vineyards of Chile and South America. So today, the stink bug is a regular member of communities throughout North and South America, Europe, and other parts of Asia. But again, you can see how recent this spread has become and then how devastating it's become. So this is what they look like in a more natural setting outside of your house with that heraldic shield shape, kind of dark brown. And then from the underside, it's a bit more of a creamy color. And there's also a decent amount of individual variation between bugs. And some will show different shades of red or black or cream. And so then the biggest question I had when I learned this bug's name is, what the heck does marmorated mean? Fantastic word, marmorated, but it meant nothing to me. And now it means something. It's the beauty of learning. Marmorated means variegated or veined like marble. And much of the early classical marble came from the Marmaris Sea above the Aegean. So marmorated refers to that unique marble-like banding pattern, a little bit on the antenna, a little bit on the legs, but mostly that outer strip of the shell. So hats off to whoever named this bug, because for finding that hidden beauty, because I think it easily could have just been named like the brown splotchy stink bug. This here is the adult bug, which is the only one I've ever seen, and my guess is the only one most of us have ever seen. So let's take a journey through the life cycle of a stink bug, and we'll see if this helps earn a bit more respect and admiration for these fascinating creatures. But again, I'm glad it was given that pretty cool name. And as with any good insect, the life cycle of a brown marmorated stink bug begins as an egg. They actually don't often lay eggs on or in your houses. That's actually fairly rare, if that helps make you feel better. But here is a mom laying a nice clutch of eggs on what appears to be some sort of metal siding. If we prefer, we can take the natural route. Here's a perfect clutch of stink bug eggs on a leaf. The literature says they lay 28 eggs in a clutch. I counted. This is 28 eggs. Well, usually I get 28. Sometimes I get 29, but I think it's 28. They start out with this greenish tinge. And if all goes well, the eggs gradually fade from green to white and then hatch into these adorable little stink bug babies hanging out together in these little nymph nurseries. And the first thing they do is eat that nutritious egg out of which they just hatched, full of good things to eat, but also the mom has left behind some beneficial microbes into the egg. So when they eat these eggs, they're gaining important intestinal flora, which is really important for a plant-eating insect. Humans have our own intestinal flora. Stink bugs have their own set of flora that they really gain by eating that egg. And then the little babies grow and grow and grow. Here's the third, fourth, and fifth instar nymphs. And they show the individual color varieties, fascinating, beautiful patterns. And those little smidges of red are pretty much only found in the nymphs and not the adults. So the adults aren't going to have, at least we can't see those nice bands of red. And the nymphs and the adults are what get that white band on the antenna, and that's one of the identifying characteristics that tells you you have a brown marmorated stink bug and not another kind of stink bug. And if you're really lucky, right after they move from an instar to instar, just for a short period of time, they have a really white flavor to their color. And so if you can see them immediately after they shed, you still see that red pattern, but it's this kind of magical white stage. So this is a brand stinking new adult. It's lost the red pattern on its back. It still maintains it on the belly, but then when the brown comes in, you kind of lose it. So As an adult stink bug, now they're full on ready to stink. The stink comes from the underside of the bug, from tiny holes in the abdomen between the first and second pair of legs, where if they feel threatened, they will emit a chemical with a pungent odor that smells to many like coriander or cilantro. And I don't know where you fit in on that cilantro spectrum. Apparently you either hate it or you don't. I love it. It's a genetic trait. But even if, so, thinking, oh, great, it smells like cilantro. Maybe I should just squish one and see what it smells like. But apparently I haven't done that. And it's probably a good thing, because even if it smells like cilantro, it doesn't mean it smells good. So those who have described the smell, who have experienced it, say, it has cilantro-like qualities, but it's more like dirty gym socks infused with cilantro, or rotting meat with a hint of cilantro. So even though it has that cilantro familiarity, it doesn't mean it's going to be a good smell. It's apparently pretty nasty. My curiosity is like, oh, I kind of do want to smell it, but that hasn't caused me to take action on that yet. In addition to smelling like stink, the stink from the stink bug also has slightly caustic properties. So another reason that you probably don't want to have it stink on you. It can damage your skin. It can be really, really bad for your eyes. And it's apparently hard to wash off. So cases on humans are pretty rare, but it can be pretty unpleasant. And also reminds me why I really don't want to mess with them. The stink is not meant for you unless you want to eat it or squish it. But the stink is primarily a defense against things that want to eat them, primarily birds and lizards and other insects. So I mentioned at the beginning that I hadn't noticed stink bugs in my house until fairly recently, and that makes sense because they didn't even reach Wisconsin until 2010. And even then, they weren't confirmed breeding here in the state until 2014. And they didn't make it to Milwaukee until about 2016. So it is a fairly recent introduction. It's a fairly recent presence in our homes, only about the last 7 years or so. But you can see that even by January of 2019, they were well on their way to spreading in the state and throughout the country. And one of the major problems here in the US and elsewhere that they have invaded is that there really are no natural predators or other factors that really slow their growth here. So they have their exoskeleton protective shield, they have their stinky defense. Not a whole lot of animals are brave enough to try and eat them, or they learn the first time that they shouldn't. And then you add to this fact that one female in her lifetime can lay 400 eggs or more, and new females can begin to reproduce at just a couple months old. So particularly in the southern US, where you can have multiple generations, do the math at how quickly you have, 24 young, and each of those females then can start reproducing more young in about 2 months, and their population can explode fairly quickly. And there are many ways in which they spread. Usually it's by humans. So they love our fruits, and our fruits love to travel around the country. So they usually hitch rides, again, on like shipping containers, but they, or boxes of produce meant for grocery stores. And, but they can also hitch a ride in cars, RVs, and they also can fly. They're not great flyers, but they're good flyers. So they don't need us to spread them around. And if they smell a good orchard, or if they smell a pheromone, they can get there pretty easily by flying themselves. This is also just a reminder of the hidden and detailed beauty of this marmorated stink bug pinned to the cotton. So the biggest problem that stink bugs bring to most of the world outside of their native range is that they're really good at two things. They're excellent at reproducing, and they are extremely generalist in their phytophagy, or their vegetarianism. So they will eat just about any plants. They're super generalist. They're like the seagulls of the insect world. Their specialism is one way to adapt. Being a generalist is another way to adapt, and these bugs eat just about anything. They do love to feed on fruits. So if that clutch of tiny eggs we just saw hatched on a fruit farm, that's a stink bug bonanza and the farmer or the orchard owner's worst nightmare. They insert that sharp beak, the proboscis, into the fruit, and then similar to a spider, they inject their saliva and then they suck out the juices. And it's not just these soft fruits that they can penetrate. They cause problems on chestnut farms. They can penetrate a chestnut in those plantations of Eastern Europe. They've been reported feeding on more than 300 plant species, and they don't have to wait for the fruits and nuts. They will also happily eat the stems, the flowers, the seeds. So they're really good at eating. They're really good at reproducing. When they feed on a fruit like an apple, and again, they inject the saliva, and then what that does is it causes the fruit to begin to rot under the skin, and that primarily causes it to brown, and that's not what anybody wants to eat. And if that's not bad enough, every once in a while, they will also introduce fruit pathogens. And then what do you do with this? There are farmers that, I don't know if this is, I hope I'm not ruining anything for you. There are farmers saying, well, can we still use these for apple juices? Can they become juicing apples? Or, could we maybe turn them into fruit roll-ups or something like that? The problem with this, and also with when they attack the vineyards in Chile, is that, again, the farmer may not know that the bugs have infected their grapes. They might not even know that when they produce the wine, but it's not necessarily the stink that could flavor the fruit. Disgusting factor aside, there could be some flavor, but it's not from the stink part, it's from their pheromones. Because when they get onto a fruit, they also release a pheromone that attracts other stink bugs to that orchard. Hey, I found this great orchard, come join me. Maybe they're being generous, or maybe they're thinking that if there's a lot of fruit bugs, it's a safer for yourself if you're in a crowd. But either way, they're releasing these pheromones. The pheromones could get into the fruit. Apparently they have, if there's enough of them, they do flavor the wine in a way that's not so great. So it's not just that they're getting the fruit, and then sometimes the farmer misses it, and that couldn't be a problem. So they can, quickly destroy a huge percentage of a crop like apples or peaches. And sometimes the damage is more subtle. And again, you don't realize it till after it's happened. The damaged crops might show up later. So, here with the soy and the corn. And so it's not a surprise that the US Department of Agriculture has prioritized stink bug control. And the most effective thing that they look at right now are traps that are baited with these pheromones, because these pheromones to bring in other bugs is pretty effective. And so if they put the pheromones in a trap, you might keep them away. An interesting thing about fruit bugs is that they're not super big travelers. And if they reach let's say a corn farm, they tend to stick around the edges. They don't, maybe they're lazy or what, but they tend to not go very deep. Maybe just like, here's the food I'm going to eat here. And so for treatment, you can kind of focus on the outer edges of the fields. A lot of regular insecticides are ineffective though, because again, these bugs insert their proboscis below the surface to feed. And so they can often bypass any harmful chemicals you put on the outside. And then that also makes it deceptive that they've even done any harm. And it's not just the adults that are feeding, it's all those nymphs, those adorable nymphs. Over 100 species of agricultural crops. And by 2010, just, not too long after they were introduced into the US, there was $37 million in apple crops alone attributed to stink bugs. And orchard growers of all kinds were infected, sometimes losing more than 90% of their crops to this insect that is just doing what it does best. But as devastating as the situation sounds, there is some hope. In their native areas, populations are kept under check through natural predators, and primarily one of the coolest insects I've ever heard of, it's the samurai wasp, which is a teeny tiny insect. You can see a bunch here on the head of a dime. So very, very small. They don't have much hope standing up to an adult stink bug, but what they're really good at is laying their tiny eggs inside of the slightly bigger stink bug eggs. And so the larvae of the wasp hatch very quickly, and then those larvae have this nice egg dinner ready for them. They eat through the whole egg, and then they kind of have the safe place to develop and turn into adults. And they do have a very strong affinity for brown marmorated stink bug eggs in particular. So they're not generalists like the stink bugs. They are really strongly attracted to brown marmorated stink bug eggs. So that fact, quite naturally, then got the attention of folks in the US that are trying to keep this under control. And we start thinking, okay, what if we get some of these parasitoid wasps over here and use them as biological control? I mean, you know, what could possibly go wrong with that? We've never had that happen over history. But researchers started looking into if this could be a good option. But while they were doing their research and you know, about to apply for USDA approval, the samurai wasp had made its way over here to the US on its own, probably in the same types of shipping containers that were bringing the stink bugs. The genetic analysis showed that it wasn't an escapee from the laboratory. So they could have even come over here as larvae developing inside the stink bug eggs. But however they got here, they're here along with the stink bugs. And, you know, we might find out naturally whether they will help control and stabilize the populations of stink bug eggs, or stink bug population. And preliminary observations show that they are retaining their specificity to stink bug eggs here. So hopefully they're not posing a big threat to other native bugs, and only time shall see. Another potential native ally in the battle against stink bug plagues is the wheel bug. It's a voracious predator that has been shown to attack adult stink bugs, eating them the same way that the stink bug eats an apple. They grab them, or like a spider eats a fly. They grab them, they inject their own digestive juices into the bug and then suck them out. So it's possible that they're either immune to the stink or this kind of bypasses that stink defense. Some birds here have also been shown documented eating, shown, you know what I mean. They've been shown to eat stink bugs. And another benefit we have going on, particularly here in the north, is that cold seems to keep them in check. So a deep freeze might help reduce their population. And over time, the stink bug numbers in the eastern United States are starting to stabilize while they're trying to figure out how to save the orchards. And this makes it a good time to watch our video break.
Can anything stop this stink bug? Oh, what? It doesn't look so bad? Think again. The brown marmorated stink bug is a fearsome invader, a relentless force, wreaking havoc on fields and orchards across the country. These stink bugs are originally from Asia, but probably made it to the US as stowaways in shipping containers a few decades ago. Marmorated, by the way, means marbled. See that pattern on their backs? They have a huge appetite, eating just about any kind of fruit or vegetable out there. They use this, a long proboscis to pierce the skin. It makes a tiny hole. Dainty eater, you might think? Nope. Underneath, it's squirting in chemicals to dissolve the fruit. Then it sips up the juices, like a smoothie. The fruit looks okay on the outside, but now it's ruined, rotting on the inside. Stink bugs can even pierce the hard shell of a hazelnut. Just squish them, you think? Yeah, you don't want to do that. They genuinely stink. When disturbed, they can release an olfactory bomb from small glands. The smell? Well, some people say it's like dirty socks or rotting cilantro. These stink bugs have spread to 44 states now. And oh yeah, in the winter, they might just show up in your house where it's warm. What could possibly stand up to them? Hello, samurai wasp. This tiny wasp, also from Asia, is an old enemy of stink bugs. It unleashes a stealth attack. A female wasp finds a mass of stink bug eggs. Then, one by one, she lays one of her own inside them. The parasitic wasp larva grows secretly inside, feasting on a tasty egg breakfast until the developing stink bug is no more. Then, the grown-up wasps chew their way out, nibbling the edges away like fingernail clippings. In their native range in Asia, 60 to 90% of stink bug eggs are parasitized this way, keeping them in check. So researchers in the US want to recruit the wasps, as long as they don't become a pest too. The wasps have already been found in Oregon, so scientists at Oregon State University are studying them as a kind of biological control. After all, using wasps is targeted, since they primarily go after brown marmorated stink bugs. Maybe someday, they could release the wasps in places where there are lots of stink bugs. Today, farmers use pesticides, but that can kill lots of other helpful organisms. Researchers know that sometimes your enemy's enemy is your friend. So soon, the samurai wasp could be doing its part to beat back the stink bug onslaught one egg at a time. Hey there, Deep Peeps.
So it's evident that the main problem with stink bug lays in the agricultural world, but as most of us are not farmers. What about our homes? That's where we see them for the most part. I've definitely found them in my house. So the question is, should I be worried? And essentially, like the ladybird beetle or the box elder bug that you may have witnessed coming into your home for the winter, the stink bug is doing the same thing. It's just looking for a warm place to hibernate for the winter. So if there is a crack or several cracks in the armor of your home, they don't need much. It is possible that they will find their way in. If you're lucky, it'll probably be small numbers. But some places, particularly in the South where it's warmer, there are accounts of thousands or even tens of thousands of stink bugs. And the problem is that if they find a nice place, they're going to release a pheromone that's going to attract others. Not something that you're going to smell, but it's going to attract other insects. And so you kind of have that tipping point. It's good if it's a low number. So the other bug that you sometimes might find in your home that looks very much like a stink bug is a longhorn beetle, but you can tell them apart. They have that long, narrow body shape instead of the shield shape, but they are kind of that brown marmorated pattern. And the much more common situation here is that you get a small number in your house. So first and foremost, they don't bite, they don't sting. They probably won't lay eggs in your house in the winter. Well, definitely in the winter. They probably won't lay eggs in your house during the egg laying season. They won't harm your pets. They're really looking for, again, just a nice cozy place to hang out until spring. And then, just like they came in, they're going to want to get out of your house, back to your garden, back to where the plants are. If they're disturbed, and I don't mean disturbed as in like poked and causing them to release their stink, but if they're just disturbed, you might see them crawling from their spot. They're very slow, and so yeah, that's likely if you'll find them crawling around, something caused them to wake up. They're not likely to cause any problems. However, when you do see one, again, it's probably a good idea to get rid of it because you want to keep their numbers small. They will, sorry, you don't want to add to their spread. So then the question is, what do we do? How do we get rid of it? You don't want to have that tipping point number. So you don't want to get that stink, so don't squish it. The more you mess with it, the more chance you have of experiencing that smell firsthand. That smell, the dirty sock cilantro infused smell. Some recommend to vacuum it up. The problem is if you vacuum it, it's probably going to release that stink, and that's going to get into your vacuum cleaner, and you probably don't want that. I know at least one of you have told me that you put them outside in the winter where into the snow, which we haven't been getting, but that's a good option because they're probably not going to make it through the cold and gives a chance for blue jays or other things to eat them up. What I have done, for better or worse, is that I trap them under a cup and I flush them down the toilet. I don't like killing them, but in my mind, this is the least bad option. I'm open to new ideas, but you definitely don't want them to expand in your house, and you really don't want them spreading outside either. So again, winter is a good time. If you have the colds, you can put them out in the snow and they'll be fine. But if you're in the southern part of the US, you probably don't want to just put them outside. And another interesting thing I found is that they prefer heights. So probably because in their apple trees, they want to get up high, maybe if you're predators, I don't know why, but it's more likely that you'll find them in your second floor than your first floor. More likely you'll find them in your first floor than your basement. Probably won't find them in your basement, except for in very rare occasions. And then if you live in like a dorm room or a condo, oftentimes the upper floors get the infestation and the lower floors don't get any of them. So I'm open to new ideas about how you get rid of them. But that's the best that I've got for now. I'm sure some of us will start to see them if you haven't already over the next month or two. Let me know what you decide to do. They are fascinating. They're so well adapted to spreading. They've likely become a permanent fixture in our backyards and our houses for now. And we'll see what happens in the coming chapters of the story of the brown marmorated stink bug. So thank you for joining me. I will stop sharing my screen. Feel free to turn on your